All right, we have Robbie Dew with us, adjunct professor. We were talking just beforehand about, correct me if I'm wrong, the stratifying of society by the further stratification of
Further.
society by virtue of technology, and it becoming hyper conscious of the stratification.
Yeah. In fact, the stratification is part of the sales strategy very often. Hey, here's something your parents don't have. Hey, here's the newest game. Do you want to be cool? And so the technology becomes a signifier of relevance and importance and so on and so forth. So, technology has always changed history and changed society. I mean, maybe you could even argue that the history of society is the history of the effects of technology on society. When horses come in, when the steam engine comes in, so forth and so on.
Printing press, yeah.
If you have one, your life's a lot easier. You profit, you do well. If you don't have one, or you don't have the skill to operate one, like say the typewriter, that was a piece of technology that now, replaced the quill. Then you have to develop that skill. I mean, I remember taking typing classes in school in the 70s, and I was like, why do I want to learn to type? What a waste of time. I'm not going to be a secretary or a office type person. I'm not going to, don't need this. And little did I know, little did we all know, that became a central skill to propel you forward. So in the modern age, we have this incredible access to technology, really sophisticated technology. The cell phone that you have in your hand is, let me put it in the camera, is like what's the quote that they always say, it's a 10 times more powerful computer than the computers that sent the astronauts to the moon, something to that effect. Yeah, it's a very sophisticated device. But now what's changed is the effect that technology has on the environment. As we were mentioning earlier, when video games came out, they were a social thing because there was this big machine in a public place.
Yes.
Later, home versions came out. They weren't as good. So arcades held sway maybe through the 80s. We don't know the exact date. At some point, the home technology caught up, surpassed, or equaled the arcade games. This accompanied the dying of the American mall and the sort of the moving away of that as a central shopping choice. And suddenly the game was in the home, but now it's a different environment. It's a private environment. And as you pointed out, you can say whatever you want.
And also arcades, there's two kind of pieces that we can quickly overlook. I mean, just how there was the social aspect. I mean, before that there were pool halls, things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now there's the arcade. And in the arcade, you didn't have that stratification. You're all kind of just there putting your quarters in, right? And there was more equity. And I think that there's a connection between equity and overall life satisfaction, if you will. But then, yes, you're right. We get away from the arcades and we have these individual consoles, these home consoles, and the social cues or the social norms are really removed. Because if I'm at the arcade in the 90s and they faded out in the early 2000s, I can't say whatever I can say, right? I could get my ass kicked.
Right, exactly. And there's a social network. There's a social hierarchy. There are going to be some boys who are from high school coming down and playing, and they might bully the junior high. So age and size is going to play a role there. And, we've all had to deal with those sort of Neanderthal social structures where might makes right. But there's a valuable lesson to be learned. You learn how to negotiate it. And if you are a little kid, you're 14, but you're really good at a game, you elevate through the social structure. And however, we can, let's not over glorify. I mean, it's a petty social structure, but you're learning how to negotiate and you're learning how to find your way. And your way might be to avoid. Maybe you go when the older boys aren't there. Or you play the games that they're not interested in. Whatever, you develop your coping mechanism, but the point is that you learn. So what we're seeing with young people today, and these are sweeping generalizations, and largely anecdotal evidence that I can't off the top of my head back up with statistical evidence, but I know that it exists. I've read it, I've seen it, and anecdotally, having 50 or so young people a year in an online class every year, maybe more than that. Gosh, maybe 100, 150 a year. I quiz them, I talk to them, we talk about these issues, and so, it's developed certain types of qualities in these humans. And the larger point that we were making before we get to the anecdotal evidence or the conclusions is that the young people we're seeing now, the young people that I'm teaching who are around 18 to 20 years old, have grown up fully and wholly within a developed digital universe. Let's say they were born in the year 2000. They
a
are
digiscape.
Yeah. A digiscape. By the time they were 7, we had Facebook, and we had the internet was really the internet by then. By 2010, 11, you end up with streaming video. So, and then I don't know, shortly after it was able to go to mobile. It wasn't long before they had figured out mobile. There was a year or so where you could get the streaming video on the computer, but they couldn't compress it down and all that. So
and sorry to interject.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's put the year into context here. So
we're
talking, these guys are born around 2002, 2003.
Well, 2000, I was saying, that would put them at 21, give or take, and 20 to 25. Some of the kids are younger; they're 18. If they're younger, it's even more the case. The older they are, the more likely they were to have caught a little bit of regular childhood, but they didn't catch much of it at 21, and anyone younger caught little of it. Now, let's not judge. It's not like the childhoods of those eras or my childhood is somehow
superior,
better and more pure. I mean, we remove the value judgments and say certainly it was different and it was a lot more outside. Do you want to say that is better and more pure? I tend to agree with that value, but there's it's. I tend to think that has a greater value for the human, but we could debate that point. But the point is, it's very, very different.
Yes.
And so now, I mean, also in the background, we should mention another contributing factor is safety, security, and fear. And so in America, through post-60s into the 70s, people started locking their doors. You remember you have all the serial killers in the 70s. You have the Manson family, 69.
Satanic Panic.
That was the 80s, I believe, or was that 70s? I mean, it just
early 90s, late.
I mean, QAnon is an extension of that. It's the same sort of like people who are willing to believe in an absurd belief system as much as like a right-wing Christian sort of reality. They'll believe anything, and it's not hard to then tell them that, well, the people we want you to vote out of power are also pedophilic demon worshipers, so you can't even, not only can you not vote for them, you should also be willing to support violence.
It's a witch hunt.
Yeah.
Right. And they even use those words.
They do because it works. Those words are trigger words, and it works for that population that's, self emulated their intelligence, detonated their intelligence by adherence to a charismatic sociopath.
Yeah.
So anyway, back on target. So you have, childhood's become very different because it's much more secured. It's much more planned. I mean, most kids would say, and I got this because I'm 54. I don't know if you got this at 32. You would get home from school or whatever, definitely in the summer, you would just go play, and go play meant run around the neighborhood with your local friends. And the general rule was you were back by dark, and different kids had different rules. And, there were times in my life I had perimeters or a sort of territory that was mine, free to roam, and areas I was not allowed to go and so forth. And, this was our existence. And now, parents are very afraid to leave kids alone. They don't walk home from school necessarily. They get picked up. I've taught in, middle schools and elementaries. This is the case.
Me as well.
Even the nicer the neighborhood, the more likely that this is. I mean, I'm sure there are some places, and blue collar neighborhoods with neighborhood schools where the kids walk, but I think it's a dwindling sort of phenomenon. It's just that the kids aren't allowed to be out in the society. I mean, think about that. Think about what that says. And I'm curious how much that's come to Canada. I mean, I think it used to be the myth, I don't know if it's true, that people in Canada didn't lock their doors. I'm sure that's true. I'm sure they lock them in Toronto.
My door's locked right now. I'm inside my house. Right?
Yeah, I'm sure that's a bit of a myth. But I mean, the point is how you, I mean, are we as a society, do we see children as our future? You know, like when I was a kid, if I was doing real wrong, I mean, like spray painting something on the side of the building, and any adult could tell me, you know, stop doing that. And I think people today would be more likely to call the police because they wouldn't see that child as somehow their responsibility or have the right even to tell some kid what to do. And the parent might show up and say, hey, you can't tell my kid what to do, even if what he was doing was wrong. Right. These are sweeping generalizations.
Sure. But for sure, to your point, the structure of parenting has morphed in correlation to technology,
and right? In correlation to how work has changed. You no longer have the extended
100%.
family. You have the
work is now inescapable.
Correct.
For so many people.
For everyone's got to work. It's chances are your commute. I mean, the average commute is over 30 minutes. It might be up to 40, but I mean, most people are going some distance. Even if you live in the city, there's still bus and walking time. So more and more of your time is taken. More and more people complain that they don't have time. Yes, you have that. You have your sweet companion with you at all times. And so what we have is these couples mostly living in cities alone, possibly separated from parents and grandparents who live back in the countryside or, on the other side of the country or even another country altogether, because the most enterprising people move to the cities to make that big top dollar, to have that premium experience, premium life saturation. So parenthood has completely changed. The kid's time is scheduled. So then we throw in technology, and now a very special wrinkle in technology, which is personal technology, the cell phone. And I've noticed that the one way I distinguish myself from most of my students is I have the phone. I'm pretty techie. I'm pretty millennial in certain ways, but I prefer to do most tasks on the computer. In other words, I won't fill out a form on a phone unless I have to, all that kind of stuff. Sort of
why do you make that?
Just because I find it easier in the phone and it's small, and also I'm out in the world with the phone. If I'm back home, I'll just deal with that at home. When I'm out in the world, I want to enjoy the world. I don't really want to spend that much time on the phone, But for
that I would say, from observational, just from observing, I would say that that's a rarity. I mean, I might be using the wrong word here, but the cell phone is almost ubiquitous with our daily life. It's everywhere.
Oh, I'm on it. I don't want to come off as some sort of Spartan or Luddite. I'm on it. A Spartan Luddite, a Spuddite. I'm on it, but I'm conscious of, like, especially if I'm enjoying myself, I'm using it maybe to find directions, find a restaurant, but I get off of it and then get back to enjoying life, I guess. Unless I'm alone, and then I'll serve. But back on target to the conversation, we have all these forces gathering to where children don't have this free time. They don't have the socialization as much. They're going to structured activities. We just went out and played. We pretended. We made up a game. We played football we made up rules so 3 guys could play football, and so on and so forth. And a lot of that is taken away. Their recreational activities are structured with a coach and do this, then do that, which is a whole different type of socialization, because now they're under a hierarchy and they're at the bottom. They're the workers, and they've got to do what this person says. And then you throw in this personal technology, which brings all of the world really to your phone and your fingertips. All the dangers of the world, all of the, what do they say? On day 1 of the internet was invented. On day 2, internet viruses invented, and then day 3, porn was invented. Something like that, Right. it's a wonderful thing, but it has all these unforeseen side effects, which are largely just aspects of the society manifesting in technological form. But that technological form is lightning fast, and it's incredible, and it's at your fingertips. You can answer any question. You don't need to remember trivia. No, none of us remember phone numbers. Why would we? I remember like my grandmother's phone number from a child. I can remember that one because I had it memorized along with 5 or 6 others. Remember, you had
Right.
about 5 to 10 numbers memorized.
Oh yeah.
Then you'd have a little black book. You don't need to remember anything.
Yeah.
You know, I got 911 memorized.
What? And sorry, and another aside, I'm very good at this, so I appreciate your ability to stay focused.
Right.
Me, I follow the threads, but is it the hippocampus, the part of the brain that taxi cab drivers, they are larger in Britain. They've studied this, that
Oh,
their
wow.
hippocampus is larger, and it's their sense of direction because they're not looking at a phone. But I'm wondering if how is our brain changing in
Changing. Okay.
relation to
So let's get to the
technology?
effects that I see as a
Yeah,
teacher. So let's get to the meat of what we were talking to.
gotcha.
This is all the preamble to explain why it's happening. So, number one, attention span.
Mhm.
You have a lot of distractions on a computer. I talked to them about that. They're writing their paper on their computer, but guess what their computer else is? It's their social center. It's their entertainment center. It's where they do their research for that paper. It's where they write that paper. It's where they
Right.
communicate with friends and family. It's where pictures are. I mean, memories, on and on and on. And then the phone is an extension of that. So all those things come with incredible distractions. They're designed that way. They're designed purposely like a casino to have ding to give, you pull the lever that makes a sound,
Dopamine hit.
a
Boom.
dopamine hit. Oh, I didn't win that time, but next time pull the lever. And
Chase that
so
dragon.
absolutely. And you can turn all that stuff off. And some students have told me they have. I don't want to say that they are universally unsophisticated about this. Some of them are aware, and some of them have made clear choices. Hey, I got off social media. I turned off my notifications, and those are really good things to do. I encourage them,
Yes.
but not all. So I just want to make that statement. It's not as though they're completely unaware, but I think as a society on the whole, we are somewhat unaware of the effects of all the technology that we created. We're still negotiating the effects of the television.
Hmm.
Okay. And it's changed many times. Just as we said before, the television initially was a social gathering point, just like the video game. Why? Because you had
Yes.
one. You had one,
Yeah.
and it was in the living room. And there was, you had to walk up and change the channel, and there was only 3, maybe 4 channels. So you gathered around, you watched the debates, you watched the football game, you watched the Macy's Day Parade, you know.
Just on that, I mean, the content, like
Mhm.
you're saying, I'm echoing what you're saying here, but the content was singular, right? So me and dad and I had completely different political views, let's say. We
Yeah.
could watch this and then talk about it after, versus now the content that I'm getting is entirely built upon my interests, my algorithm.
Absolutely. And even the news media at that time was more general. You have the
Yes.
CBS, ABC, NBC.
Yeah.
CNN comes along in the 80s. Fox was 90s, 93, something like that. It was very generalistic. And you might say, well, they're slightly more conservative over here. I think CBS was the slightly more conservative of the 3 networks. And NBC, I think, was the most liberal because it had the smallest share. So it was always kind of scrambling and trying new things. But generally speaking, it was kind of down the middle, a sort of agreed middle. So you and your dad could watch it, and you might have different takes on it, but you could watch it together. Now, of course, it's bifurcated.
Yeah.
You've got right wing, farther right wing, Hitler files. I mean, it just keeps on going.
Right.
And further dividing public opinion.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a second point. We brought up shorter attention spans, and my students cop to that. They cop to that. Second, you have a great division within the population because of the diversity of information. I mean, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. We all don't have time. There's so many times when people send me articles to read. Oh, this is brilliant. Everyone's talking about this. And sometimes I'll get to them, and sometimes it's just there's so much
Yeah.
to absorb within a day.
So many choices.
And there's so many choices. Plus, there's all of my research, some of it which is interesting and relevant, and some of it is other fluff, which I digest like pizza on a Saturday night as filler. It's just this is something as filler. So a third point: inability to work through problems, lack of stick-to-itiveness. So lack of perseverance, to put it succinctly. And again, my students have copied to this, and this comes back to the video game culture, to the internet culture. It's instantaneous. You do a search. The search comes up. It's got a paywall. Go to the next one. Nobody pays for a paywall, right? Most of us dodge paywalls, Sometimes we'll sign up and get their emails just so we can look at the damn article. But even that is a hassle for me. I'll find it somewhere else. You'll figure it out. You'll read the blurb. And the students are no different. And when they encounter obstacles, like, where do I find it? They often, again, we're generalizing here, and you have great range within abilities. Many parents who prepare students for life, they do better. Those students do better. The parents that are too busy working or have checked out or whatever is going on with their relationships, those students tend to be more ravaged by the downsides of media because they've absorbed it without any mediation, without any refereeing, without any advice or coaching on how to negotiate that. So they tend to, have tackier taste, and they tend to more easily fall victim to the predations of the form. So let's see, that's 3. So struggling, and then the fourth one, which we've talked around, is a lack of social skills, a lack of ability to do what we're doing now, where we're conversing. Although I'm monologuing quite a bit, I apologize. You seem to like it.
Yeah. I'm taking notes. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that was what you would get at the arcade. That was what you would get watching the news with Dad when he, said, that's a bunch of crap. And you're like, why do you say that, Dad? Well, no. And maybe you'd have a conversation. And
dialogue.
You might not agree, but you would figure out, okay, this is where he's at. I'm not there, or maybe I agree with him, and these types of things. And these these social negotiations, they have difficulty with. Okay, and again, this is a self-avowed by the students themselves, or self-declared. Sometimes the words, I would say, and then maybe this would be a fifth one, which relates to the fourth one, lack of ability to socialize and resolve conflicts or negotiate within a group. Inability to express oneself in verbal and written form. Now, the written form part had been declining for decades, going back to my generation, okay? Go back and read the letters of the Civil War era from the common soldiers. They're eloquent, they're poetic. And this is because
I'm just going to counter that, because how high were the literacy rates back then? So the people that were writing were did you know that Hawaii was the most literate place in the world on the latter half of the 19th century?
Wow.
Yeah.
They just weren't part of the Western world, so it barely counted. It didn't register.
The history of Hawaii is fascinating. But anyways,
your point is well taken.
Yeah.
But
it might be a poor sample.
I think unassailable that we have transitioned from a literary culture where newspapers, print is the written form, book is the primary or major creative form in the 18th and early 19th century, to visual medium, film getting stronger and stronger through the century, then television the second half of the century, and now computers, which now have really encompassed both. Most people are, you're watching stuff streaming. It's on the computer. The television and film industries have been subsumed into this central device. And so I find that a lot of them do not easily, their thoughts don't come to them easily. They certainly aren't good on their feet, so to speak. Their word choices, they have very poor diction. And this is particularly the group I have, which are probably maybe the first generation in college.
Fully enthralled into technology. They're
fully
born. Yeah.
They're fully enthralled in technology, and they're not great at language. I mean, the texting, remember, is a bastardized version of language. It uses a lot of coding, and it's much like tweeting, and even to some extent, to expand to the video form, TikTok. Its brevity is the key.
Yeah. We
Brevity
demand
is
succinctness. Get
all
to
right,
the
well.
point.
McLuhan says the future of the book is the blurb. You know, and I expanded, the
Oh,
future of the movie is the trailer.
well, yeah.
You know,
So many trailers I've seen, it's like I have no. They
you have
told
no
me the entire
desire.
story.
And
Yeah.
some of the worst movies, especially ones that are genre fair, where you essentially know what's going to happen. The trailer shows you everything. That's the bad guy. It's going to come down to the showdown. They show it almost happening, but they don't. And they usually give you one or two of the best jokes. And sometimes you'll see the movie, and those were the only good jokes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the future of, media, that type of stuff is getting shorter and shorter. Now, we can't just bemoan this. It's also because we're more sophisticated observers. Okay? We have gotten better. Our minds have gotten better at processing visual information.
Yes.
Just as the minds of the 18th and 19th century got honed and polished at processing written information. The novels and the language, especially English, got more and more sophisticated and interesting.
So question for you. This is what's kind of coming to my mind is that
Okay.
the 18th, 19th century, there were specialists, right? Like, this guy, he knows this. He's the all-seer of this. Now we're much more eclectic, do you think?
Yes, that's absolutely unassailable as well. I mean, society is getting more complex. There was actually a term, I believe it's a polymath.
Yes.
I
had never seen that word before this year, and now I've seen it several times.
Poly something. Maybe it's probably polybiblio. Basically, someone that had read everything that had been written in the Western world. Hegel and perhaps Kant were considered one of the last ones of people who had read everything that was published. And this was 1700s, early 1800s, maybe.
Also, because so much of those original documents were destroyed, so only so much of it still existed. Like
sure, but I mean, it doesn't include
that.
Eastern. It doesn't include Confucius.
Yeah.
So it's very, very culturally exclusive.
Specific,
but that was possible up to a point. Now that's, of course, no longer possible. There's too much stuff to have read. Too much thought. The society continues to get ever more specialized. Also, that's true of the humans. I mean, the humans that we're producing, and this has been true for this has been true also for my generation. I got a little bit of it, which was, are the men handy? Okay. Most men today might be able to write some code. Maybe they can, figure out some low-grade computer tech problems, but they can't fix the car. They don't know how to build anything. They don't have those set of skills. Again, not a judgment. It's the world is changing. Their skill set reflects that world. But now they have, a keyboard and a mouse, and not a, screwdriver and a drill. All right. When I went to Australia a few years ago, 2008, you could tell just the men were sort of like American men in the 50s. It seemed like everybody was at least a part-time mechanic. I remember discussing with a surfer how much, violent confrontation was a part of conflict resolution in his youth, and probably up until that day, he's in his 30s.
And it was high that was how you would resolve problems.
America. I mean, you go back to the 50s. The sort of gang age of American youth, where you have a rumble and that stuff continued, but it largely faded.
Why do you so why do you think that faded? Because when I keep in mind, I'm kind of an interesting generation in that 1989 I was born. There was a period of what felt like great global peace. Then September 11th happened, and that was like the age of anxiety had begun. It was like, whoa, how could this happen? Like when my father told me.
Well, the race is, as America becomes wealthier and wealthier, the culture, the society, and even its citizens are evolving. athletes are getting bigger because the nutrition's better, because their lives are better. They don't have to fucking work in a field, okay?
Right.
All day and just, be abused.
They can do this thing and get.
They can all.
Yeah.
The training's gotten better, the technology's gotten better, and also now you can make, you can be a millionaire, so you're willing to invest whatever it takes, reasonably within your means, I suppose. Let's get rid of that. To invest in yourself or your product to achieve those goals. You're willing to pay $100,000 a year to go to college because you know the degree that you're going to come out, perhaps an MBA, will be worth that. So you have increased specialization, but you also have an evolution of the species away from manual labor.
Right.
Okay? Look at the model for the men in the 70s, which was the last era where this is true. A hairy guy, okay, a macho guy. And we're generalizing here. Okay, there was also examples of femininity, David Bowie and Mick Jagger at different times, and we're talking iconic figures here. And the flowering of gay culture in the 70s as well. But in mainstream America, you had that more masculine male, and then now the modern male, first of all, for sure, hairless.
Yeah,
okay? Hairless is the model. Okay. Now, there's not a perfect relationship between being handy and being hairy. But the point is,
but there's an air of primitivism to it, one might say, right?
Sure,
drawing that connection. But anyways,
sure. The progression of the culture is away from manual labor, away from old forms of males who were hairy, who were big, and who were physical. Okay.
I can't help but drawing again, I'm sorry, but connections to Edward Gibbon's The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, the people of Rome were like, I don't want to be a farmer. I don't want to be a soldier. Let the barbarians do.
Okay, and let's bring this around to be point number 5 or 6. We've lost count for the youth. The youth now who have been raised on technology, who have access to the world and its multitude of possibilities, from its perversions to its fabulous careers and lives. There are people in this world that live unrealistic lives. They fly around on jets, and everywhere they go, it's a party, and everyone kisses their toes because they're whoever.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't want that life? It seems ideal. It seems to be you ride above the normal cog and flow of society. They have access to all that. And so many of them are unwilling to do. That's why many of them are not taking on crappy jobs. And hey, can we blame them? I'm going to potentially contract COVID doing this $13 an hour job, which I have to show up 9 to 5 or 7 to 4 or whatever it is. They're saying, they're calling bullshit on it, but it's also an evolution. And I don't want to be the old man who's like, kids are soft. Oh, my day. That's a bunch of crap. The day has changed. And you're right. And this is the natural evolution that happens within empires, what happens within succeeding civilizations is, we're still in our empire phase. We're in the decline phase and pretty much in the decadent phase of it. And it'll still probably continue to go on as a society for a few decades, but it probably will cease to be, or society maybe for hundreds of years, but it'll cease to be a empire in a few decades, I think. We got a lot of soft dudes. Not just, and I don't mean that in a machismo way. I just mean people, they want what they want. They don't want that 9 to 5 job. They don't want to work for the factory. Guess what? Remote work. I work from home. That's what I do. There's no way I want to go back to a job. If you want to call that soft, I am as soft as it gets. I don't want to go back to a place where I have to clock in. I mean, it feels almost primitive.
Well, it's once you let the horses out of the stable, right? And which is what happened during COVID.
Absolutely. And I was surprised by that. I mean, I thought it would help it, but to me, the advantages of remote work, which I've been doing for 2 decades, I've had remote work for 2 decades. I was an early adopter. To me, they were obvious. And I had to try to convince people, oh, no, give me a break. Once you do it and, get through a little bit of the hassles, it's a great way to make money. But the society really caught on. And all that time gave people time to think about what they wanted to do. And it made a lot of people realize, hey, I want to get out of this relationship, this job that's going nowhere. I got to make a move, because the same thing happened after 9/11. I mean, it's a near death experience
Right.
tends to make people get serious. I mean, a lot, and it's also a reminder. I mean, to flip it around, a lot of people are leading directionless lives that they've sort of found themselves in, relationships and also jobs, and it's working and it's paying the bills. And by the way, you have a lot of them now, so thinking about changing might be difficult.
Yeah.
So our young people, come bringing it back to that issue and how they're different. They're sensing all this, they're seeing all this, and they're seeing how they'd like their lives to be. And they're not growing up with those same work hard values. And by the way, those work hard values have been shown to be BS.
Oh,
All the money has gone upward in the pyramid. I mean, people are
yeah.
becoming aware of the pyramid. I mean, that's the upside of conspiracy theories. Is some of the good part of that is expose people to the sort of the game that's been going on this planet, which is capital is always and constantly progressing at a higher rate
Yeah.
than the working class, and the capital controls the political system, and the capital gets what it wants.
Yeah.
And they're not happy about it. They just don't know it. They don't know what name to put on it. And sometimes a demagogue comes along and it says it's their fault, and they believe that person because that person's not me, and I can assume all the blame is his. So it's a dangerous time politically, and I am concerned and interested to see how this younger generation will progress through time. And that's an important thing to remember. I mean, you can't just say, the 80s. The 80s were like this. Well, the 80s were like this for different generations.
Yeah.
Older generations had an experience. The people who are in the prime of their working years had an experience. Youngish people, 8 or maybe even 16 to 25 are still in that kind of, that's your social years. That's where your social life, sex, partying, exploring is your primary focus, we'll say. And then, everyone transitions at different time, of course.
Well, and on that, I mean, it's so gradual. It used to be so gradual, these changes, right? Like I watched a video and it was footage from like 1898. And it was like, okay. And you can see that, for a long time, change was slow. Now
Whoa!
it's so rapid.
Right.
There's always been people that are like, oh, if only they knew then. But back then you had services and disservices, as McLuhan would say.
Sure.
But now it's so rapid and it's such a scramble. Nobody can really predict what the next 10 years are going to look like based on how the last 5 have changed.
Just think about
right?
just a real simple thing like the mail system. So if you wanted to send your results to a colleague, you used to have to send them through the mail. Now, as soon as you zip it off, I'm halfway done. Take a look at it tonight, and I'll see the rest tomorrow.
I can scan a document on my phone and send it off.
Well, it's all digital. So that alone has increased the rate, because the electrons, us being the electrons in the case, can communicate and zip and exchange energy very, very rapidly, and it's accelerated growth and development in every field. And again, you with the internet and so forth, you have access to a lot, and including having access to the lifestyles of the rich and famous. You also have knowledge of what we're doing to the planet. You also have knowledge of how the underclass, which is growing, and their state of poverty is growing. Okay, you have awareness of that. You can have awareness of yourself up and down the socioeconomic stratus. The ones at the top are the ones that we glorify, our celebrities, are super wealthy. We now have a billionaire class that is James Bond in its effect on society. And we also have a growing underclass of homeless. So your awareness can be great, which is good. We can't be against that. But it also creates in the human, it can create in the unguided human. Let me put it that way. Okay. It can create in the unguided human unrealistic expectations for what their life can be and should be.
Yeah.
Now, you can't, you're not going to be very proper telling people they've got to tamper their dreams, especially in America. This is the country of dreams, right? I mean, this is where it happens, baby, or so we like to think. But there are realities that can be accessed digitally that take years and a lot of luck to access in the physical world.
Well, on that, I mean, we're so stuck in where we are.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have, like, language allows us to think into the future and reflect upon the past, but really we are stuck here as organisms. And as such, we can kind of forget our place in things, because if you were to extrapolate us right now and go back 150 years ago, like I'm middle class, I would be a king.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the
Sure.
things that you have, but it's all relative. See, we can't really, we can't, like, that's saying that is so abstract. Like, yeah, but I feel, you know what I mean? Like, I feel terrible. And that is, there's a book, I forget the guy who wrote it, but it's called The Broken Ladder. And it's talking about how social inequity is making us sick.
Correct.
Like, it's killing us, literally.
There's considerable ink been spilled on the topic, and very sound arguments and even statistical research showing that when you neglect your bottom, when you don't have a healthy society, you're always going to have strata within society based on skills, privilege, birthright, inheritance,
biology,
and hard work. There are humans who are not all equal in what they've been given.
And primates, sorry to interject, but also just primates. There's an alpha primate, right? We are.
When you live in a society, particularly,
Sure.
I mean, you know, and particularly one now that where it's hard to ostracise. You know, remember if you're too bad an egg back in tribal days, get the hell out, buddy. You're on your own. So you're going to either become a very good survivalist or you're going to die.
Right.
And we can't really do that. There's no place to put people. You know, to some extent, the American West was where our most adventurous, our outlaws, our people who couldn't fit in, they just ran out there. Australia, same thing. Send the kooks over there. I mean, that's what England did with a lot of their religious kooks, which is, you know, forever, you know, doomed this country to have a deep thread of religiosity running through it. So, the society, it doesn't make sense to some people, but the numbers show that if you let it deteriorate too much, if you fail to see it as a body, as an organism, if you just neglect that part of the organism, it brings the whole thing down. Takes a while. Won't see it right away. You'll still enjoy your steak dinner in the fancy restaurant overlooking the homeless people in the park, but eventually that's not going to work out for you. And I'm planning a trip to San Francisco, and my friend was telling me that they're having the highest number of break-ins and like, you know, people breaking into cars, broken windows, and
the poverty there is unbelievable.
It's actually making me consider, you know, I'm probably not going to bring my car. I'm going to park it outside the city and take the BART in. I'm not afraid of the poverty and so forth, but I'm kind of curious to see.
Yeah. Well, but even in, like, I don't know if you've ever been to Vancouver, but there's a downtown East Side.
East
Side, right?
Commercial Boulevard, baby.
Yeah, yeah. And that is where they gentrified it, right?
So they gentrified. See, last time I was in Vancouver was maybe 10 years ago, and Commercial Street area was kind of hip and also a little dangerous. It was like there was cool bars and some cool coffee shops, maybe an art gallery, but it was, you know, where people who weren't afraid of that stuff lived. And what you're seeing now is that's been gentrified?
Well, I mean, so you see this everywhere. They're trying to do it in Harlem.
Yeah.
They're trying to buy it up and then push people out there and make these $1 million condos.
This isn't just
new. But in San Francisco, it's so wild because you're on one block and you're like, oh, this is a beautiful Art Deco building. You cross the street, a guy's taking a shit on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I saw that in San Francisco. Like, it's just, it's becoming like the meridians. There are none or something.
Yeah. Well, again, this is these are all elements of a empire and a civilization in decline. The work ethic and also the grinding of humans.
Yes.
We don't grind humans like we used to. You know what they used to do with the Irish when they were exhausted from digging the Erie Canal? Bury them right in it. You know,
No
we don't
way.
do. Yeah, you can look it up. You know, we don't do that sort of thing as much. Not to say that we're without our,
I think we kill ourselves.
Sure,
mentally.
and police brutality and so forth and so on.
Yes.
But
yeah.
We don't do that as much.
But hear me out. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm going to interject again. But they don't need to, because we do it to ourselves, right? It's like terrorism. How many people actually die from terrorists versus how many people die from motor vehicle accidents? There's no comparison.
The gains of the baby boom generation, the gains of the hippie of the 60s are primarily in the areas of social freedom. So you can basically smoke pot in most places of this country. You can, in a lot of places, you can marry someone of your same gender.
Yeah.
You can do it, women can be president, not yet.
Yeah.
But it's coming, hopefully. There's these great advances, but in the areas of warfare and politics and economics, there is stagnation.
And I think that's because of our brain. I mean, I'm sorry that we're going so off topic, but evolutionarily speaking,
I'm talking about
animals.
Those kids.
We're animals. So animals live in an environment that stress is a messenger, right? So if there's a snake, you want to have a stress response to the snake. But if you got a deadline at work, it's very different than there being a poisonous snake in the field. Yet your body doesn't know the difference.
Sure.
Right. So the dopamine.
But I also think that just as I said, we're evolving. So have our minds. That we've evolved literally up through the stem of our brain, and this is where the more alligator reptilian brain is. And you get into the front part where the cerebrum, where I believe most of the more intricate processing takes place. Well,
this is the newer part.
We're growing into it. We're unlocking it. I mean, if how great could a man be if he's divorced from need and worry about money and need and worry about food, and you have a society and a social net that gives purpose but yet supports people in a balanced way. You can't give everybody everything. We've seen that model can fail as well, but you strike that balance. What inventions will that person come up? Sure, some people will descend into hedonism and lethargy, but that happens anyway. Those that are lucky enough to do that, but many more, I think, enough in the end will propagate themselves with ideas and propagate the world with ideas and fix problems
if given the right environment.
And incentive and encouragement. I'm going to recommend a book to you. It's called The Three-Body Problem. The trilogy, I believe, is called The Remembrance of Time. Could be wrong about that, but it's called The Three-Body Problem. Is the more common name, and it's a wonderful trilogy by a Chinese author, Sushin Liu, and it's the first first Hugo Award-winning novel by a Chinese author. And it's getting a lot of press. I believe Barack Obama has read it and some other interesting characters. And he's clearly influenced by the Foundation trilogy by Isaac Asimov, which is the seminal sci-fi trilogy of all time.
Right.
First discussion of a galactic empire, having that sort of model within sci-fi. And he really goes far. And one of the things that he gets into that relates to our discussion is, I don't want to give too much away, but it involves a potential invasion by an alien species that is very close to us, and how that knowledge changes the society. And at different points, different technologies are favored, and the society, the Earth Society, he largely takes it as one. He doesn't go too deep into the difference between the Chinese and the Americans and so forth. He sort of takes a little bit the easy way out and just sort of says, okay, after a little bit of scuffle, we we got our shit together and became
We're a
one
federation.
world. Yeah, something like that. And that for purposes of the novel, that makes sense. Otherwise, you got to get into all the various politics. And so at some ages when life was very easy, he has his male characters are very soft and effeminate. And the language and even the way the people speak, everyone's attractive and they have wonderful skin. And in different ages, and there are men who the cryogenic freezing exists in the novel. So what basically happens is people get frozen and woken up 100 years later, but they've retained their physicality. So the men from the old era are very distinct and they look like men, and they're a little gruff, and they have an angular face. And
whereas the people of this time are more androgynous.
And they speak in a more elegant, soft way, and their manner is very different, as created by the times of the technology. Then there are crisis eras, which bring out some of the worst in the characters, and you see a more sociopathic and me first sort of personality arise, and so on and so forth. And you have these ebbs and flows. I think there are many reasons to enjoy that novel, but that's one reason.
Well, I mean, it is like that cycle that has been memeified all over the internet, that weak men create bad times create strong people, strong men.
It's usually framed in a sexist way, but I know what you're talking.
Yeah. But really, it is people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can get too used to our luxuries,
absolutely,
which has happened to empires throughout time.
Absolutely, that's it. That's what we're talking around. Is that the average middle class white person doesn't want a blue collar job.
No,
they want to be a doctor, a lawyer, they have an architect, someone who has some agency and determination over their work, and has a freer flowing schedule, and their work comes as a product from their thoughts, not their fucking labor.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to give the Italian up yours to your audience.
Right. Yeah.
That was
this guy. Yeah. But that's the other thing, is that what we're seeing in these jobs that once required, strength and manual labor jobs.
Yeah.
The I'm not using the right word, but the machinization of it, whatever that word would be. But did you hear
machine meme? We're moving towards the machine meme. It exists in our culture.
Exactly.
But that started with the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution wanted,
and Luddites were like Luddites,
humans into machines. We got 3 shifts. There's one at 8, and there's one at we're gonna work because the machines can run all night. You'll have to.
Did you ever see that movie? Just kind of closing, because I know your game started, but it's Sorry to Bother You.
No.
It's an interesting movie. And what the guy is, he works at a call center, and he just calls people up and he says, sorry to bother you, tries to sell them stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting film, and the character's name is Cash is Green. But anyways, maybe read the synopsis. But there's a twist in it that you're just like, what the hell am I watching? And it's such an interesting metaphor for what could be going on. So I recommend that film. But just be aware that it's
I'll recommend
the
Brave New World television series.
A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley.
Yeah.
I think that right now it's a combination of people always say, is it this or is it 1984?
Well, it was 1984 for the Russians. They had a much more totalitarian, old school propaganda.
But what's cancel culture? That's pretty 1984. That we can just wrap people
but I hesitate to draw the right, which feels so very aggrieved, tends to associate any kind of moral pronouncements coming from the left, and cancel culture is definitely part of that, as fascism. It's a leap. I'm not saying it can't get there. I'm not saying that I don't find it offensive at times myself, but I think we're in the midst of a pretty strong backlash against cancel culture. I think Dave Chappelle's
he was the pushback on that.
He 100%. Was. There have been others, but the fact that Netflix backed him, the fact that it was such a social issue. We'll see what history holds, but I think that could be at least a data node on the sort of transition in the thought. I think we'll start to see more pushback on that. Listening to the radio, sometimes I like to listen to dumb classic rock DJs as they try to, have some
Explain it.
humorous patter. And this one DJ, the joke, the point of her unhumorous diatribe was that youngins gotta just get bent if they, if the way I talk and the way I am offends them. And usually when jokes like that make it down to that low level of cultural personality, a local DJ is, it's pretty low level. That means it's real acceptable. That means it's sort of been churning in the culture long enough now that you can make fun of young people for being overly sensitive and like just kind of putting up your hand and saying enough's enough.
I think what I Robbie, I always do this to you. I'm sorry, man.
I know, man. I've got surgery. I've got to perform over here. Go ahead.
But the schism that I'm seeing is between sensitivity and senselessness.
Ooh.
Right? Like, yes, I'm a school counselor. I champion sensitivity, right? But knowing that balance, and that's what it comes down to. It's the Tao of existence, right? So we have to balance these. Like, we have to be rational, but we also have to be sensitive. But on the sides, they're too sensitive, and then the right side, they're being too senseless.
Well, I think I'm breaking out this analogy before. In America, the Republicans are sort of like an alcoholic father.
100%. You haven't mentioned this, but
we're constantly gaslighting the population. We didn't do that. They accuse the other side of doing things they just did a year before, and they're constantly changing the rules, sort of like a sociopath, alcoholic, totally self-absorbed person,
parental type,
that archetype. And then the Democrats typically are the enabling codependent mother who's, it'll be okay, and they sometimes overgive and overprotect, and to compensate for the excesses of the father, they'll here's a bunch of money, or here's a program, and their solution, their problem there is always therapy, or let's create a program for it, and so forth, which sometimes has genuine benefits. I want to be fair, and also offset some of the horrible policies of Republicans, but it never gets at the core issue, because it's almost always a reactive response, not let's fix the society response.
And one argument that I've heard that I do think has some value of, against the Democrats, is that it infantilizes certain groups. It makes them powerless. Like, take the money, right? Versus, what is the actual change here? Not certainly not always, and I'm not the one to be speaking.
That's a common argument you'll hear on the right, because
exactly,
because the Republican leaders have put this meme out in the world so that the peasants will do a self-governing process. In other words, if you can get everybody to agree that you got to work hard and pull your weight, and there's loafers over there, then they'll vote against their self-interest, and they'll do a self-policing thing on people that maybe need a little help. Certainly there are excesses, and certainly we've seen that when people get money, as they did during COVID, they're happy not to work, and they're happy to ride that train. But, considering all the other things I didn't get from my culture, I'm not likely to get, like nationalized free healthcare, like free college, or any of the other things that European societies have. Since I'm not going to get any of that, when I do get a handout, I'm damn happy to take it.
That's a good point.
Well, let's end on that one.
I like it. Enjoy your game. Thank you very much. Let's do this again.
Let's do it again. I really had a good time, and it flowed. I mean, we could even almost do semi-regular.
Sounds good to me.
You can call me up, and we could even do like a half hour and try to really concentrate on a topic. And because I think maybe a good half hour is probably better than a pretty
Now,
good 50 that has
yeah.
good moments throughout.
Well, you're good at keeping it focused because I mean, I'm a liberal arts guy, right? I'm like,
Right. I'm just a Virgo, man. I can't help it.
I'm a squirrel chaser. Well, hey, yeah, let's keep in touch and we'll do it again, okay?
All right.